Spain looked rich. That was a problem. Across Europe, the image was unmistakable. Ships arrived from distant oceans heavy with silver. Ports groaned under their weight. In the capital, stone palaces rose higher each decade, their walls decorated with symbols of triumph and faith. Gold flowed through royal chambers, across long tables, into vaults stacked deep behind iron doors. To the outside world, Spain appeared unstoppable. It fought wars on multiple fronts. It financed armies, fleets, and allies. It absorbed crises without flinching. When danger appeared, Spain paid it away. When rivals challenged power, Spain outspent them. This was not poverty pretending to be strong. This was wealth on full display. We are taught that wealth buys security. That money creates safety, influence, and time. The truth is harsher. Spending without strength does not protect an empire. It delays its reckoning. Spain's story begins at the moment its leaders believed money could replace power, not supplement it, not support it, replace it entirely. Imagine a state that never says no to itself. Armies are paid without question. Debts are rolled forward without fear. Each crisis is solved by opening the treasury again. Tomorrow is always someone else's concern, someone else's shipment, someone else's loan, someone else's problem. At first, it works. That is what makes the trap so dangerous. From the outside, Spain's confidence looked earned. Its empire stretched across continents. Its ships crossed oceans that others feared to sail. Its crown commanded resources few states had ever controlled at once. Silver poured in from overseas mines. Gold followed. The numbers seemed endless. As long as the flow continued, Spain could spend more than its rivals, fight longer wars, and recover faster from losses. That belief shaped every decision. Money was not just a tool. It became a philosophy. Why restrain spending when riches kept arriving? Why reform systems when payment could silence problems? Why build patiently when purchase was faster? But beneath the glitter, something vital was missing. Spain lacked productive depth. It lacked control over the machinery of trade. It lacked the ability to generate wealth at home instead of consuming it from abroad. Its economy was wide but shallow. Money passed through Spain like water through stone. It entered quickly. It exited just as fast. Goods were bought, not made. Ships were hired, not built. Weapons were purchased, not produced. Spain was rich, but it was dependent. That dependence was invisible while silver flowed. It became fatal once it slowed. The central question Spain never truly answered was simple and brutal. Can an empire survive if it only spends and never builds? Think about that. Can power be rented forever? Can stability be borrowed endlessly? Can money replace the slow work of creating systems that endure? Spain tested this idea on a global scale. It tested it with armies, fleets, and entire continents at stake. This was not a reckless experiment. It was a confident one. Spain believed the math favored it. As long as resources kept arriving, collapse seemed impossible. This is not a story of sudden defeat. There was no single battlefield where Spain lost everything. No dramatic invasion that shattered the empire overnight. Instead, this was a quiet unraveling. A slow erosion driven by decisions made far from the front lines. Decisions made in counting rooms where ledgers mattered more than factories. In royal courts where prestige outweighed productivity. In distant colonies where extraction replaced development. Each choice made sense on its own. Together, they formed a path that could not sustain itself. Picture the rhythm of the empire. Ships arrive. Payments are made. Credit expands. Confidence grows. Then the cycle repeats, larger each time. Spending rises because it can. Expectations rise because they have never been disappointed. Rivals watch and adapt. They learn that Spain prefers buying to building. They learn that Spain needs imports to function. Slowly, quietly, they position themselves on the other side of every transaction. They become sellers. They become financiers. They become indispensable. Spain becomes dependent without realizing it. Inside the empire, the signs are easy to ignore. Prices rise, but money is plentiful. Craft decline, but imports are abundant. Debt grows, but lenders keep lending. Each warning is softened by wealth. Each weakness is masked by spending. Leaders look at full treasuries and assume strength. They look at shining cities and assume resilience. They mistake appearance for structure. The empire feels invincible because it has never been forced to stop. The danger of this illusion is that it removes urgency. Reform feels unnecessary when money solves problems faster. Investment in long-term capacity feels slow when purchases bring immediate results. Hard choices can always wait until later. Later becomes a habit. Later becomes policy. Later becomes destiny. Spain did not collapse because it was careless. It collapsed because it was comfortable. The stakes were enormous. Spain was not just managing a kingdom. It was managing a system that connected continents, economies, and millions of lives. Its decisions shaped global trade routes. Its spending influenced markets far beyond its borders. When Spain chose consumption over construction, the consequences echoed outward. Other powers adjusted. Financial centers shifted. Production moved elsewhere. Spain remained at the center of transactions, but lost control over their terms. Think about the psychological weight of constant wealth. When money keeps arriving, restraint feels foolish. Saving feels unnecessary. Building slowly feels like hesitation. The empire trained itself to expect abundance. Any interruption felt temporary. Any shortage felt solvable with more spending. This mindset hardened over time. It became institutional. The state learned to survive crises by throwing money at them. It never learned to prevent crises by strengthening foundations. What makes the story unsettling is how modern it feels. The logic is familiar. If a problem appears, spend more. If growth slows, borrow. If pressure builds, delay the pain. Spain did all of this centuries ago, at a scale no one had attempted before. It believed its access to resources was permanent. It believed its credit was unbreakable. It believed confidence itself was a form of power. For a long time, those beliefs were rewarded. But systems built on flow are fragile. They depend on movement. They depend on trust. They depend on conditions remaining favorable. When those conditions shift, the system has nothing solid beneath it. Spain's wealth was real, but its strength was conditional. It could act, but could not adapt. It could spend, but it could not pivot. That difference would define its fate. This chapter is the threshold, the moment before the illusion begins to crack. Spain stands at the height of its confidence, surrounded by silver, convinced that survival can always be purchased. The empire does not yet see the trap it has built for itself. It does not yet understand that money is not power when it cannot command production, trade, or time. The question hangs quietly in the air, unanswered. How long can spending hold an empire together when nothing beneath it is growing stronger? At its height, Spain looked like the future written in stone and sailcloth. Flags flew above distant ports. Ships stitched oceans together in steady, predictable rhythms. The empire moved resources across the world with a scale and confidence no rival could match. In its cities, life felt permanent. Markets were busy. Churches rose with carved detail and heavy bells. Streets filled with soldiers, clerks, merchants, and messengers. Everywhere, the signs of success were visible. Wealth did not hide. It announced itself in architecture, ceremony, and spectacle. To live inside Spain's empire during this period was to believe you stood at the center of history. The illusion of strength was powerful because it was tangible. Gold coins paid soldiers on time. Silver funded fleets without delay. When war erupted, money moved fast in fear. Credit flowed easily because lenders believed Spain could never fail. Why would it? Resources arrived from across the sea year after year. Even when expenses surged, confidence remained unshaken. Spain did not scramble. It paid, and payment, in a world short on cash, looked like dominance. For a time, it truly was. Spain's leaders saw no reason to restrain themselves. They commanded wealth other states lacked. They had access to global resources, while rivals remained regional. This created a dangerous certainty. Spain believed it had solved the problem of limits. Where others faced scarcity, Spain faced abundance. Where others hesitated, Spain advanced. Why build slowly when money could buy speed? Why invest patiently when purchase delivered immediate results? The empire began to see production as optional and consumption as efficient. Weapons were bought from abroad. Ships were commissioned from foreign yards. Tools, textiles, and supplies arrived from rival economies. Spain became the world's greatest customer. It could outbid competitors and secure what it needed without delay. At first, this seemed like mastery. The empire controlled demand, and demand commanded obedience. But demand is not control. It is dependence disguised as choice. Spain did not see that distinction yet. Internally, this approach reshaped the economy. Local production weakened as imports became cheaper and more reliable. Skilled work declined because foreign goods arrived faster than domestic ones could be made. Workshops closed quietly. Trades lost relevance. Why compete when the empire itself preferred to buy elsewhere? Money flowed in from overseas, but it did not circulate deeply at home. It passed through, settling debts and funding expenses before leaving again. The economy grew wide but not deep. Spain mistook movement for growth. As long as money moved, the system felt alive. As long as ships arrived, confidence held. The empire measured success by what it could spend, not by what it could sustain. That mindset reshaped policy. Investments favored appearance over capacity, prestige over infrastructure. The state paid for outcomes instead of building systems. Each decision seemed reasonable. Together, they hollowed the structure. Meanwhile, Spain's rivals were watching. They did not challenge Spain directly. They adapted. They learned that Spain preferred buying to making. They positioned themselves as suppliers, manufacturers, and financiers. They built industries around Spain's demand. They invested in production Spain neglected. Quietly, leverage shifted. Spain remained wealthy, but its partners grew stronger. One side consumed. The other side produced. The balance was changing, unnoticed. Credit deepened the illusion. Spain's reputation made borrowing easy. Lenders trusted future shipments. Debts rolled forward smoothly. Each loan reinforced confidence. If lenders kept lending, the system must be sound. That logic became circular and dangerous. Credit masked structural weakness. It allowed Spain to maintain spending without addressing erosion beneath the surface. As long as money was available, reform felt unnecessary. Imagine a house with marble walls and a hollow foundation. From the outside, it looks indestructible. Inside, it feels solid. The floors shine. The ceilings impress. But the weight it carries is unsustainable. Pressure does not announce itself immediately. It builds quietly. Spain's empire was a house. Its appearance convinced everyone, including itself, that nothing could threaten it. That belief delayed the moment of reckoning. The empire's scale amplified the problem. Managing distant territories required constant spending. Garrisons, fleets, administrators, and supply lines consumed resources continuously. These costs did not create new capacity. They preserved existing reach. Spain spent heavily to maintain control, not to deepen resilience. Every expansion increased obligations. Every victory raised expectations. The system required ever-increasing input just to remain stable. This spending culture shaped political behavior. Leaders gained influence by securing funds, not by strengthening foundations. Success was measured by what could be financed now. Long-term capacity offered no immediate reward. It did not win wars quickly. It did not silence unrest overnight. Spending did. Over time, the empire trained itself to choose speed over durability. That choice would define its fate. Inside Spain, prosperity felt uneven. The capital gleamed, but productive regions stagnated. Wealth concentrated in administration and consumption, not creation. The economy relied on external inflows rather than internal momentum. This made Spain sensitive to disruptions it could not control. Whether shipping delays, conflict, or market shifts abroad mattered more than domestic policy. The empire had traded autonomy for abundance. Yet confidence remained high because the system kept working. Money arrived. Expenses were covered. Rivals hesitated. Spain's leaders looked at the present and saw success. They saw full treasuries and functioning armies. They did not see fragility because fragility had not yet been tested. The illusion held because the environment remained favorable. Pressure always arrives eventually. It does not rush. It waits. Spain's rivals continued building quietly. They expanded production, improved trade networks, and refined financial systems. They learned to profit from Spain's spending. Over time, they gained influence over prices, supply, and credit. Spain, meanwhile, doubled down on consumption. It saw no reason to change a system that rewarded it so far. This chapter is about confidence becoming complacency. Spain did not ignore reality. It misread it. The empire believed that access to wealth equaled control over it. It believed that spending power equaled strength. It believed that scale could substitute for structure. These beliefs were reinforced daily by visible success. That is why they were so hard to abandon. Think about how difficult it is to question a system that keeps delivering. Every year that passes without collapse feels like proof. Every crisis solved with money feels like validation. Spain lived inside that reinforcement loop for generations. By the time cracks appeared, the habits were fixed. The institutions were shaped by spending, not building. The empire had optimized itself for abundance, not endurance. What makes this moment critical is not what Spain did, but what it failed to do. It failed to invest deeply in production. It failed to protect domestic capacity. It failed to control the terms of trade it depended on. These failures were invisible because spending covered them. The empire looked unstoppable because it had not yet faced resistance from the system it relied on. The illusion of strength is always strongest before it breaks. Spain stood at that peak, confident, wealthy, admired, and feared. Its city shone. Its ships ruled the seas. Its treasury appeared endless. But beneath the surface, the foundations were thinning. Pressure was building. And when it arrived, spending would no longer be enough to hold everything together. The cracks did not announce themselves with panic or collapse. They whispered. They showed up in small distortions that were easy to explain away. Prices began to rise as silver flooded markets faster than goods could absorb it. Money lost weight even as it multiplied. What once bought stability now bought less with each passing year. Spain was rich, but everyday life grew more expensive. This was not seen as danger. It was framed as the cost of success. Wealth, after all, was still arriving. Local industries felt the pressure first. Imported goods undercut domestic work. Foreign manufacturers, supported by Spain's own spending, could produce cheaper and faster. Workshops closed quietly. Skills faded across generations. Production did not vanish overnight. It eroded. Spain did not notice because imports filled the gap. Shelves remained stocked. Armies remained supplied. The system seemed efficient. But efficiency without independence is fragile. Debt became routine. What began as a temporary tool turned permanent. Each war was financed by borrowing against future shipments. Each crisis demanded money immediately, not later. Loans stacked on loans. Interest payments became predictable expenses. Spain was not just spending wealth anymore. It was spending time. The future was being pulled forward to sustain the present. As long as confidence held, this felt manageable. The core mechanism was simple and deadly. Money entered Spain, but value leaked out. Silver arrived, then flowed outward again in exchange for goods, services, and interest. Spain acted as a conduit, not a center. The empire controlled the flow, but not the destination. Over time, others controlled pricing, supply, and credit. Spain paid the bills but set fewer terms. That is the difference between wealth and leverage. When shipments slowed, even briefly, stress rippled through the system. Payments tightened. Credit conditions shifted. The empire discovered how sensitive it had become to interruptions. These moments were warnings. They revealed how little margin existed beneath the spending. Each disruption was met with the same response: borrow more, spend faster, restore confidence at any cost. The solution deepened the problem. This was a turning point, even if no one called it that at the time. Spain learned that money without leverage is fragile. It could pay today, but it could not shape tomorrow. It could fund wars, but it could not reduce their cost. It could sustain power, but it could not renew it. Think about that. An empire able to act, but unable to adapt. Inside royal councils, choices narrowed. Reform meant restraint. Restraint meant admitting limits. Limits threatened confidence. Confidence kept credit alive. So reform was postponed. Loans were approved. Comfort was chosen over capacity. Each decision felt rational in isolation. Together, they locked the empire into a cycle it could not escape. Wars grew more expensive as rivals improved efficiency. Spain spent more to achieve less. The returns diminished, but the spending accelerated. Debt expanded not because Spain was reckless, but because it was trapped. Cutting expenses risked instability. Raising taxes risked unrest. Reducing commitments risked loss of prestige. Spending felt like the safest option, even as it weakened the system. Confidence finally began to crack. Lenders demanded higher terms. Credit became conditional. Trust was no longer automatic. Each loan carried more weight. Each payment mattered more. The empire had less room to maneuver. At this stage, survival required structural change. Domestic production needed revival. Trade needed control. Spending needed limits. These steps were painful and slow. Spain chose a familiar instead. This chapter is the moment the illusion fails. Not in spectacle, but in mathematics. The numbers no longer support the story. Wealth still exists, but it no longer protects. Spending still functions, but it no longer stabilizes. Spain reaches a point where money can only delay outcomes, not change them. The empire has momentum, but no resilience. When confidence finally breaks, spending will not save it. Collapse rarely looks like collapse when you're living inside it. Spain did not wake up one morning to ruins and silence. The empire continued to function. Courts still met. Armies still marched. Ships still sailed. Money was still spent. That continuity was the most dangerous part. It created the illusion that nothing fundamental had changed. But beneath the surface, the system was already hollow. Power was no longer anchored in Spain's own capacity. It had drifted outward to those who produced, financed, and controlled the channel Spain depended on. The empire remained visible, but its center of gravity had moved. Cities that once gleamed with confidence began to stagnate. They did not burn. They slowed. Investment favored preservation over renewal. Maintenance replaced growth. Shipyards that once echoed with activity fell quiet, not from disaster, but from irrelevance. Spain still needed ships, but increasingly relied on others to build them. Skills faded. Infrastructure aged. The empire's physical presence remained, but its economic pulse weakened year by year. Spending continued because stopping felt impossible. The state had obligations it could not abandon without consequences. Garrisons needed pay. Administrations needed funding. Debt required service. Each year demanded more resources just to maintain the appearance of control. This is how decline becomes expensive. Spain spent more not to expand, but to avoid contraction. That distinction matters. Expansion creates future capacity. Avoiding contraction only delays loss. Influence faded without a single decisive blow. Rivals did not need to defeat Spain outright. They simply needed to outproduce it, outfinance it, and outlast it. Control over trade routes shifted. Financial centers elsewhere gained leverage. Spain found itself reacting rather than shaping events. It could still intervene, but at higher cost and lower return. Each action drained more strength than it restored. The aftermath was not sudden ruin. It was long adjustment. Spain remained a state, but no longer a system setter. It adapted to a smaller role, while carrying the weight of past ambitions. This transition was painful because expectations lagged behind reality. The empire had been built for abundance, not constraint. Its institutions struggled to function in a world where money was no longer unlimited and credit no longer automatic. What Spain learned too late was simple. Wealth must be anchored to production. Spending must be backed by strength. Money without structure is temporary. When flows slow, when trade shifts, when confidence breaks, only capacity remains. Spain had allowed capacity to erode, while wealth masked damage. By the time the mask slipped, rebuilding was no longer easy or fast. The modern relevance is uncomfortable. States today face the same temptation. Borrow instead of reform. Spend instead of restructure. Delay instead of decide. Imagine an economy living on credit. Confident that tomorrow will cover today. It feels safe. It feels manageable. Until it isn't. Spain's story warns that money is not power by itself. Power comes from what an economy can sustain when conditions turn hostile. Think about what truly holds systems together. Not cash, but control. Control over production. Control over trade. Control over time. Spain had money, but it surrendered control piece by piece. When pressure arrived, it discovered that spending was not a solution. It was a disguise. And once the disguise faded, there was nothing solid left beneath it. This is why Spain could not spend its way to survival. Survival requires resilience, not just resources. It requires the ability to adapt when flows change and confidence weakens. Spain optimized for abundance and paid the price when abundance became conditional. The lesson is not that wealth is dangerous. It is that wealth without structure invites dependency, and dependency always carries a cost. History does not repeat itself, but it echoes. Spain's echo is clear and sharp. When spending replaces building, decline begins quietly. When debt replaces strength, power slips away unnoticed. And when the reckoning comes, it arrives not as chaos, but as limitation. Spain's empire did not fall in flames. It faded in slow motion, spent into weakness. If this story helped you see power, money, and history differently, subscribe for more cinematic explorations like this, and share it with someone who should hear it.